Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you so much for joining us for another segment of Health Professional Radio. We're joined this morning by Dr. Patricia Hunt, Regents Professor in the School of Molecular Biosciences at Washington State University. She's joining us to talk about her recent award in research in prenatal development and some of the factors that impact that development. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Dr. Patricia Hunt. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Well, I did, of course, mention that you're Regents Professor in the School of Molecular Biosciences at Washington State University. Briefly tell us a bit about yourself.
I was trained in human genetics, and I thought that what I was going to do for the rest of my career is actually try to work to understand why, as women get older, we're at an increased risk of having a chromosomally abnormal pregnancy. And that still fascinates me. But my world and my life got kind of co-opted by a misstep into the world of endocrine disrupting chemicals, man-made chemicals that behave like hormones, and that's taken a lot of my attention.
Well, tell us about this award and why it's so meaningful to you.
This is from the March of Dimes, which is, an internationally known entity, and so that made it very special. In addition, this was a complete surprise. It's always nice to get recognition from your colleagues, but in this case, it was totally unexpected. Mm-hmm. And lastly, and to me very importantly, I was mentored by 3 tremendous women scientists, and 2 of them were previous recipients of this award. So that made it for me extra special.
This is the March of Dimes Richard B. Johnston Jr. MD Prize in Developmental Biology. Is that the correct name of the reward?
That's correct.
Tell us about your research, some of the pitfalls, some of the moments that really surprised you.
It's been a strange journey. I started off interested in the effect of advancing maternal age on our ability to make a normal egg. And that, to me, is really still a riveting question. It's a very, very complex and interesting problem. And we've made a lot of contributions over the years to understanding that problem. But along the way, in the course of studies trying to experimentally unravel this problem, we stepped into the world of Bisphenol A, and it was an accidental exposure. We were using mice for some of our studies, and in the midst of our studies, right when it looked like the hypothesis we were testing was we're actually getting data that supported it, all of a sudden everything fell apart because our controls were no longer normal. Mm-hmm. And it turned out it was an accidental exposure to Bisphenol A when the cages in the water bottles that our animals were being housed in and drinking from were accidentally damaged. And the plastic, which was polycarbonate plastic, which is comprised of Bisphenol A, was damaged and started to leach Bisphenol A. And it was a very sudden change in our data. From one week, things were normal in our controls, and the next week, our controls didn't look like controls any longer. Mm-hmm. And it took a long time to unravel this, but that was our first step into this world of these man-made chemicals that can influence our body's endocrine system, our hormones.
What was believed to be just a problem with aging, and I guess par for the course as we age, as women age, turned out not to be the main factor.
You've hit it right on the head, because what we were thinking about is maybe we're responsive to our environment, because one of the things that's interesting about the effect of age on our ability to make eggs is everyone knows that with advancing maternal age, we see an increase in chromosomally abnormal pregnancies. What few people realize is that our very earliest reproductive years, there's also an increase in chromosomally abnormal pregnancies, although there's much less data there because these are teenage pregnancies. So I was arriving at this conclusion that, maybe it was subtle changes in the hormone environment in which the egg was growing. And we were testing this hypothesis when, in fact, we suddenly saw an effect of a hormone-like chemical, Bisphenol A, induced the same sorts of problems. And that to me was fascinating because it meant this process of making an egg is environmentally responsive. And that still strikes me as a dangerous thing. These are the eggs that are the future, that are our next generation children. And the idea that they're responsive to changes in the maternal environment to me is fascinating. But there's awful lot of evidence of this now, and in fact, we know all of pregnancy is, in fact, the placenta is sensing the maternal environment and responding. So we are environmentally responsive, and these chemicals, as a result, can induce some pretty significant changes.
We've all heard about the forever chemicals, the plastics in the oceans and in the forests and whatnot. But was there much talk about petrochemicals, the industry as a whole, and addressing this issue in some of their dealings? Was the connection addressed with that industry?
Well, you're asking a good question there, because this was 20 years ago. And at the time, BPA, Bisphenol A, was not a household word. Very little was known. There were a couple of other investigators who had reported some very intriguing findings in experimental studies. But essentially, these were early days, and these types of chemicals were not known as endocrine disrupting chemicals, really, and they were not very well known. So in fact, the response to our first paper was enormous. When we published this, we were essentially saying, if humans behave like mice, we have no reason to suspect they wouldn't, since the process of making an egg is very similar, then this chemical that we're all exposed to on a daily basis could increase the risk of having a chromosomally abnormal pregnancy or a miscarriage. And I was really concerned about publishing that, so I wanted to make sure that I had everything correct and that we'd done everything to make certain that we had the correct answer. So it took me several years to get up the nerve to publish this paper. And when I did, it attracted a lot of media attention because there simply wasn't much information out there about BPA. And this actually turned a lot of attention toward this chemical.
What is the benefit that you see as a result of your research on the public? And what does the future of your research look like after winning this prestigious award?
Part of what this has done for me is it's made me think a lot about how scientists act and interact in the real world. And I don't think we're very good spokespeople in general. So I've devoted a lot of my attention to trying to ensure that the next generation of scientists is better equipped to speak to the general public and tell them about our science and what our findings mean. And I'm really concerned about these chemicals. In my opinion, these kinds of exposures are a global health issue. And they're also a health disparity issue because the most exposed segment of the population is lower socioeconomic groups. So I'm really devoted to this, and I'm really concerned about helping people to understand it and trying to think about how we regulate chemicals and what we should be doing in the future. So there's an awful lot of work left out there to do, and I'm in the process of trying to make sure that the next generation of scientists that come along are better equipped to do it.
Give us a website where our listeners can learn more.
So about the award is marchofdimes.org.
March of Dimes, www.marchofdimes.org.
Yes, correct.
I've enjoyed speaking with you this morning, Dr. Hunt. Hopefully you'll come back and give us some updates as research continues in this area.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Dr. Patricia Hunt. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Health Professional Radio.